All right, so we left off with mean of discrete random variables. So we have a formula for that. If you remember, mu is mean. So mu equals our sigma notation. You remember is that sum. So the sum of your variables times the probability of your variables. Okay? And then each x value is multiplied by its probability. Okay, so after you do the multiplication, like it says in the formula, then you're going to add them up. Okay, so mean of discrete random variable, we have mu, which is mean, and then the sum of our random variable times the product of our random variables. So for example 5, the probability distribution for the personality inventory test is shown. Find the mean score. So if we have our table, we have our random variable, and we have the probability. Okay, so we would just take our variable times our probability. So this one's 1 times 0.16, which is just 0.16. And we're going to do that for all of them. So then we have 2 times 0.22. So you should get 0.44. And then you continue this process. So 3 times 0.28. Hopefully you get 0.84. And 4 times 0.2 should get 0.8. And the last one, 5 times 0.14 should get 0.7. Okay. So if you remember from yesterday, these values, the probabilities have to add up to 1. So always check that they add up to 1. So 0.16, 0.22, all the way to the bottom, make sure they add up to 1. They should. And then we're going to take all these numbers that we found, all these decimals, after we did all of our multiplication, we're going to add them up. So go ahead and do that. Go and add those up. So 0.16, 0.44, 0.84, 0.8, and 0.7. We should get 2.94. We got 2.94. So what does this mean in the terms of our 0 to 5 passive aggressive scale? So what this means is on average, your ratings are not extreme either way. So all that means is that since the middle, if you remember from yesterday, a 3 means you aren't passive aggressive, but you're not extremely aggressive. So on average, the ratings are not extreme either way. And so they're pretty close to that 3 ranking. All right. So go ahead. I want you to try number 5. I'm going to pause and then I'll have answers on here. All right, so when you finish your problem, you should have these probabilities from the multiplication that we talked about over here. And when you add them up, you should have 2.6. So what this means for this problem, because they're talking about sales per day, is you have on average a new employee will make 2.6 sales a day. That's all that means. So when you have your average and you're finding it, when you interpret it, take a look at what they're asking for. So if they're talking about sales per day, so on average, their new employees are making an average of those sales per day. All right, so next two things, we're going to talk about variance of a discrete random variable and standard deviation of a discrete random variable. So we have these two formulas. So if you remember from when we did standard deviation and variance before, we have sigma squared as our variance. So then for this, it's equal to the sum of your random variable minus your average, your mu, squared times the probabilities of your random variables. So when we did variance before, it was very similar. We just didn't have this probability right here. So then standard deviation is going to be the same. Same idea. Regular sigma without the square is your standard deviation. So it's really just the square root of your variance. So when we take the square root of our variance, we have the sum of our variables minus our mu, which is mean, squared times the probability of our variables. It's all under the square root. So we have these two formulas that we're going to use. So if you know one, the other one is just the square root. So let's look at example 6. So we're going to use our formulas here. We have this chart. So the probability distribution for the personality inventory test that we've been using since example 2 says find the variance and standard deviation. And if you recall, the average, the mu, was 294 that we found from the previous page. So we just brought that information over. So our mu is 294, 2.94. Okay. So in our first column, we have our x, we have our probabilities. So now in our next column, we need to take our x minus our mu. So we're going to take 1 minus 2.94. So when we take 1 minus, I'm going to do it off to the side, 2.94, we should get negative 1.94. We're going to keep going with that. So then we'll take 2 minus our 2.94. And you keep going with that pattern. So then 3 minus 2.94, you should get a positive 0.06. 4 minus 2.94, you get a positive 1.06. And then 5, you should get positive 2.06. So now in our fourth column, we're going to take the subtraction we just did and we're going to square it. So we're going to take the negative 1.94 and we're going to square it. Okay. I'm going to bring up my calculator. So negative 1.94 in parentheses, we should get 3.7636. We're going to do that for all of the third column, all of these numbers. Okay, so here's the numbers that we should have. Whenever you're squaring a negative, you should have a positive number when you're done. So now the last column says we're going to take our square and our probabilities and multiply them together. So 3.7636, we're going to multiply that with our 0.16, our 0.8836, we're going to multiply that with our 0.22, the 0.0036, we're going to multiply that with our 0.28, and we're just going to finish the column like that. So then when we do our calculations, I'll let you guys do that in the calculator real quick, and I'll show my answers. So once you have your last column, all of your decimals, so check them, make sure they're right. Go ahead and add them up. And you do that, you should get 1.6164 roughly. Okay. So what we just found in our last column was our variance. So 1.164. So roughly about 1.6. Now if we took the square root of the 1.6164, that's our standard deviation. So when we do that, we get about 1.3. Okay. So using this example, go ahead and do the U try number 6. All right, so take a minute and check what you have. This is where you can pause the video and make sure your numbers are right. Remember, mu is 2.6. Do subtraction for your third column, square it, and then multiply your probabilities for your last column and add at the bottom. This will give you your variance, and then you take the square root of that number to get your standard deviation.